This is the second AE Modular podcast. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I have with me Felix from the Tuesday Night Machines and Zach Slowscape. Felix is tuning in from Cologne in Germany, and Zach is all the way out in California, in sunny California, I hope. And my name is Carsten. I'm the fifth Volt. And last time Felix was hosting this podcast on his channel. This time I'm hosting it on my channel, and we'll see how it goes for the next podcast where they are being hosted. So today we have a more of a chatty podcast, I guess. We've prepared something about the talking about DIY projects which are just exploding on the forum, and Felix and Zach have some ideas and some thoughts around that. And in the second segment, I wanted to talk about recurring patterns in modular patching that I find I use all the time. And I just wanted to chat with Felix and Zach. What are the things that they do all the time in their tracks as well? Because we can't save presets, so we'll see how that goes. Before we get started, I wanted to say a really big thank you to Moruial and his partner Lou Best for doing this introduction, the intro logo, which looks really awesome. And yeah, thank you very much for just chipping in. Great stuff on the community. We just put stuff out there and people just put up their hand and say, I can do this. And then it just happens. It's fantastic. So without further ado, over to Felix. What's new in the DIY world in AE Modular?
Okay, yeah, hi. Yeah, I mean, lots of stuff actually. Somehow, the DIY scene is really, as you say, exploding on the forums and on the Discord chat. I feel that there's most discussion actually in Discord happening in the DIY channel recently, because people who are even absolutely new to DIY are discovering DIY through AE Modular, and that was the case for me as well. Like, since I've started with AE Modular, I've come from soldering just kits very crudely to designing my own modules from scratch, and they actually work. And I've done more Arduino coding because it's so easy to integrate, and I've got a little bit more analog circuit knowledge as well. And there are a bunch of people on the forums that are going even faster at it, and they are just learning from scratch DIY stuff in a very quick time frame, and that is quite exceptional, I think. And you don't have that for any other formats. And yeah, I think Carsten, you've done some DIY as well, and Zach, I mean, we already see it in your picture there. You've got a bunch of DIY components behind you. So what are you working on at the moment?
Yeah, yeah, I know. I do some physical DIY. I tried doing the circuits and stuff, and I made a little Turing machine with an Arduino, and then I ended up crossing some wires somewhere and fried it immediately. So it worked for about an hour before I fried it. So that was the last project I did in terms of actual modules. But I've been wanting to get back into it, and I've kind of just been following along on mostly the Discord, just kind of watching what different people are doing. Kurt is doing like crazy stuff all the time, every single day. There's something new that he's working on, and he's really kind of been taking us along for the ride because he's learning as well. I think he had a little bit of background, but I think for the most part he's just diving in. And so
Yeah, and he's documenting his stuff very
yeah,
well, right?
which
And
is
there's
super
always this little, talks or chats on the Discord, just bouncing ideas around and just struggling or just figuring out some small questions, and then you get this documentation on the forums. So I think Kurt is also using both the mediums quite well.
right. Yeah, Felix, you were saying, was it your post on the forum? You had made a post, and it's like just one of the top posts on the forum in terms of views, and it was just like Arduino module or something like that. Was that you?
Yeah. It was a simple CV to USB-CC converter, a MIDI CC converter. So you just patch in your CV, and then it converts that to USB MIDI, so you can control some software synthesizers. But I think, and maybe Carsten, you can have some insights as a moderator or as an admin in the forum, why or where those hits are coming from, because I think there are like 7,000 views on that thread. But I think they're probably mostly from just people Googling Arduino and modular synthesizer stuff, and they're finding this post. Because I don't think many people have actually built it, or there hasn't been much feedback on the AE Modular community.
And in terms of the actual AE Modular community, I haven't seen anybody who's actually built it, but somebody is out there.
Exactly, yeah, somebody is mass producing them.
I'm just while you guys are talking, I'm just looking up the analytics for this.
Okay.
See if I can
so I
find
guess
it
we
out.
could just, while you're doing that, I could just show off my little DIY projects over here.
Oh yeah.
So I've been building these cases lately. I have this laser cutter at work, and I was like, let's build a case. So I kind of just been messing around with different designs, and this one has got little feet on it. Kind of makes it a little nicer like that, I think anyway. And, went with a little thicker material, and I kind of got really into this idea when I first had my starter rack too. At first I felt like, oh, I really want like a, there's obviously there's modules that I wanted, right? I wanted, let's see, I wanted a multi effects. I wanted to get some different sounds in my music and things like that, and but I had the starter rack too, and I was like just kind of playing around with it and trying different things, and I ended up creating some really crazy sounds that I haven't been able to reproduce since expanding my sort of palette, and I've kind of it was kind of like a bittersweet when I got my first set of new modules. I was like, I wasn't done exploring the starter rack too. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, and I think there's just so much in that starter rack too. Just hidden away, and you just have to patch in new creative different ways. So anyway, with that in mind, as you can see, I've got a lot more modules now, but I wanted to kind of pare things down. So I created this tiny little rack. This is a 7U rack, and I made it just so that I could get back to my roots of exploring what these modules are actually capable of. And they're capable of a lot more than you might think. Just get creative. And that's what this is all about. This is all about getting creative and just learning and coming up with new things. And I've actually found myself using it more than my bigger one, just because it's so accessible, and I've got a little battery pack. I could plug it in, and it's fully remote that way. And but yeah, that's a lot of fun. And this is a bigger one I built, and this one actually. So I got the spring reverb, which I love. I wish I had gotten that sooner. It's just got such a nice sound. Almost want two. It really makes. Anyway, we're not talking about that right now, are we?
But spring reverbs are really awesome, yeah, and I think having two for stereo is even better.
Yeah, exactly. So I ended up building this case because I felt like the spring reverb was, I didn't want to have that off to the side. I kind of wanted to hide it away. So I built this case with the spring reverb in mind, and it actually hides underneath it. So
yeah, that's really smart. That's really cool, yeah.
yeah, it works well, and I mean, I guess one regret is that I can't get in there and touch the springs and stuff. And I see a lot of people doing that, and that's kind of fun. Um, so who knows? Maybe I'll redesign it and make it open somehow.
Hmm. Yeah, but I think that's always the problem, like where to keep the springs, or where to keep the spring tank, not only for a small format modular like AE Modular, but it's the same for Eurorack and other synths as well, because the spring tanks are always just a little bit too big to be yeah, inside the case often.
But Felix, and I remember about 2 years ago, you made a little module with tiny springs in there, and they were exposed on the front plate. Do you still have that
Hmm.
module?
Yes, I do, and I can actually just share my screen real
There you go.
quick if,
Awesome.
Oh,
yeah.
It's as if we've prepared this, but actually we didn't. At least I didn't. It's
Well, I
awesome.
did a little bit.
I remember seeing that on the forum, and I'm really new to modular, and I had no idea what I was looking at.
Hmm.
What is that thing? But okay, now I fully understand. Now that I've actually held the spring reverb,
Yeah. The problem with this, though, is that it has different impedances. So it doesn't match with what the spring reverb module, the receiver, or the interface for the spring reverb tank on an A modular expects, because it's made for the bigger tanks.
Mhm.
So my sound is actually really, really quiet that comes out of that small spring tank because the impedances are higher, I think. I'm not sure about impedances really, but I need to boost the signal quite a lot to hear the reverb actually.
huh.
But it was a very cool experiment, and yeah, because I cut a little hole in the front panel here, I can touch the springs, and then I had a lot of other space because the module just because the spring tank only takes up half the module's height, so I just took some force sensing or force sensitive resistors and just stuck them on the bottom part of the front panel, so I can use it as like a 4-finger pressure sensitive keyboard as well. And when I tap this very hard, then the springs, of course, also vibrate a little bit. So there's also some interaction happening there. And then I still had some more space and added 2 photodiodes here, 5 and 6. So I have light dependent resistors as well. So when I shine a light on it, then yeah, I have like light resistance attenuators. And so yeah, just to use that space that I had left.
And now these other features, they are independent of the spring reverb, or do they interact with the spring reverb?
No, not electrically. They are completely separate from the spring reverb, and only when
Like
I
you said
touch
with
it,
the
of
tapping
course.
on a little,
Yeah.
yeah.
So no, that's completely separate, and was just just a quick
Okay.
idea or a spontaneous idea to use that space.
Swiss Army knife of
Hmm.
modules.
This must have been one of your earliest DIY creations.
I think it was my second
Hmm.
DIY module. And the nice thing is that those small blue spring reverb tanks, they're very cheap.
Hmm.
I think you can get them for $10 or $11, something like that. And I actually destroyed 2 of them before I actually figured out how to make this properly, because they are very delicate in their connectors, and I always just, I don't know, wiggled around with them too much to fit them in the case, and something broke inside. But yeah, that was fun, and I like the pressure sensitivity. Actually, I use the spring reverb quite few times actually nowadays, but the sensing, the pressure sensitive pads, they are really, really useful in my patches, just to add a little bit of human feeling to, yeah, to the patches.
Cool.
I think
Now,
that's really important in modular to get that sort of human feeling somehow. Um, I mean, that's sometimes it could get a little mechanical. So yeah, I
Yeah,
definitely understand that.
yeah, I really would like to see more modules that give you like tactile feeling, like sliders or like a theremin or something like that that you can touch to use your fingers to really change the sound in ways that are not so sequence and robotic. So that's why I'm really looking forward to playing with this new joystick module that I've yet to make a video about. But I played a little bit.
But you have it already, right?
Yeah, I have it. And it looks really awesome. And it does have that theremin feel where you just wiggle it and you can affect pitches and cutoff frequencies and all kinds of things in really cool and subtle ways. So now I want two for both hands.
Yeah, I was thinking about like just getting a small case with two on the side.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, somebody had mentioned that to make, when I was making these cases, somebody had mentioned, oh, make it like a controller, you know, I need two little things for my hands. I was like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And if you have a small case like that and you have an Arduino with a motion sensor, you could build that maybe. That's maybe another idea where you can just kind of wiggle the case. We're opening up a
whole new world of modules right now.
Yes.
But Zach, are you planning to sell the cases?
I was thinking about it, and then I was, you know, I did a trade with somebody, and so there's one floating around out there. But I mean, yeah, I guess I'd be open to it. I think for me to sell something, I feel like, oh, I want it to be polished in some way. I want it to feel like a product and not just like a DIY type thing. I mean, and these are pretty sturdy. They actually do. They feel really sturdy. At first, you know, they're unfinished. I don't paint it. You know, this is just the burn from the laser. And at first I was like, oh, it smells like a campfire. There's no way I could sell that. But the smell kind of goes away. So maybe I just burn them and let them sit for a while. Then I could feel comfortable about selling them. Yeah, so I'm thinking about it.
So people could message you on the forums or on Discord if they are interested.
Yeah, if someone's really interested in it, they could message me either place and we'll work out a deal.
Yeah, because I absolutely feel the same way, like what you said about, you know, if you have lots of modules, you get you lose the touch to the individual modules. So having a small case like that, for me, it's the same. Like I've just gotten a small case, and yeah, I'm just rediscovering how much is possible with little or with a few modules actually. Yeah. And then if you have a big case already, then you have lots of modules to choose from to put in that small rack and to spend some time with more intensely. And I think that's really important also for people who are just growing their module collection.
Yeah.
Just to, you know, get a small case too. Yeah.
Yeah. When whenever anybody is like, I'm thinking about this case of, you know, but I want this and that. And my default answer is usually, get the starter rack too, and just use it for a good half a year before ever buying anything else. Just the starter rack 2 is going to have what you need to make a song, really. I mean, you can make music, and just play with it and learn, and then once you kind of have grasp of how it all connects and works, then start expanding. But I mean, that's my own experience, and I came from nothing. You know, I didn't know how to really make music before. I tinkered around with different programs, but I've never made a real song. So yeah, it was a whole new world to me. I didn't even know what a VCO was or a VCA. I didn't know what it was or did. And once I had that starter rack in front of me, I knew I had everything I needed to kind of make a song. I didn't know what it all was, and then I just started plugging things in and found out, you know. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I think that's what many people experience. Yeah.
Yeah. That's my little.
Just going back to the DIY stuff, it's that the DIY push was something that Robert really wanted to really take off in last year when he created the DIY module, which is kind of like the set of components that you can use to make your own module, and the breadboard module, of course. And what I found was I actually haven't seen anyone use the DIY module yet. So it's kind of there, was probably a good idea. What do you guys think about that? Why are people not using that?
I
I think I've seen
suppose
Rodney use it. I think I've seen Rodney use it.
Uh, yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe Rodney, but yeah, that's one person.
uh, for me it was always that making modules is so simple that I don't actually need the individual components or like a pre-built base for a module. I always felt like you could just buy blank panels and then just drill them or saw stuff out of them and then just take your usual perf board, cut it with a saw, and then it's very individual and but still quite easy to manufacture.
So you go, Zach.
I feel like, I mean, I don't know how many have, sorry, I'm lagging a little bit, so I didn't mean to cut you off a little bit, but I don't know how many have been sold. I don't know how many are out there, but I could also see it being maybe the people who are interested in doing DIY, they might just, like Felix said, like kind of, you're going to DIY the whole thing. But I don't know. I don't know how many are out there.
Yeah, I don't know either. Also, the breadboard module. So I think a few more people have used the breadboard actually, and I see that definitely in Kurt's case. I've seen that there. And so have you guys used the breadboard module at all to prototype stuff or use it for little patches on the fly?
Not really real or like full patches, but definitely for prototyping. Yeah, just having like a 5-volt and ground connection there is really useful, and especially if you're just working with one IC, like one integrated circuit, like one little black chip there, it's very useful. I think for a bigger project, it's too small, of course. But what I also still have actually on my breadboard, which is just always there, is an infrared receiver. That's just like an LED, like the size of an LED, and it's just stuck in there and just wired permanently, and I can just use any infrared remote and just zap it, and it'll just output pulses according to the infrared remote code that I'm sending. And that's really cool. If you just have one little component that does what it needs to do without lots of circuitry around it, then I think that's very useful, especially like an IR receiver that I'm using, infrared receiver. That's not expensive. I don't need to solder that into a module that can just be stuck there. And if I lose it or if it breaks off, it doesn't matter because I just have a bag of those. And I can still, use it for something else if I want to. And it doesn't take up module space, basically. So for these kinds of things, I think it's very, very useful indeed.
Awesome.
Yeah, I personally have not used, I don't have the module, but I feel like I'm going to be entering that sort of world pretty soon. I've slowly been collecting components and stuff, so I have op amps have always scared me, basically. So I think I'm going to dive in, maybe with the help of Kurt, and learn about op amps. And so I think I'll be joining that world of where I'm going to maybe need that module, or not. We'll see. I don't know. I don't know where it'll lead.
But on that topic, let me share the screen again, because this is a project that actually started on the breadboard, or on my DIY version of the breadboard back then, of the module. And this is a bigger module now, where I soldered everything permanently inside a module, and the front panel looks like this. So here I have just separate components, which are again completely separately wired. It's just an AND logic. It's a quad switch, so it's a voltage controlled on and off switch. So I have an input and an output, and when the voltage goes high on the control port, it'll just let the output through to the or the input through to the output. There are two square wave LFOs, and there's a counter. You send a clock in there, and it just counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 10. There's OR logic to mix gates, and then there's a super warp generator, which is like a weird square wave circuit. So everything is square wave based, so I call it the grand square, and the module is square as well. But like I showed you, or like I can show you here on the PCB, it's actually, this is all just like the switch, for example, that's just one IC, and that has 4 switches in there. I only need 2 more capacitors and a few more resistors, and that's it. And that can be really nicely prototyped on the breadboard module because it takes very little space. Same with logic. That's just transistor logic, 2 transistors, a bunch of resistors, and you have AND logic or logic with diodes. That's just a bunch of diodes. Square wave LFOs, little more involved there with the controls, but that's a dual LFO also. So that could also be done easily on the breadboard with 2 speed potentiometers. A counter, that's basically a sequencer, like a 10-step sequencer here. And that's just one IC, 2 capacitors, 2 resistors, and 2 diodes, I think, and that's it, and a little LED. So those are all projects, or that's actually all components I found left over from other projects in my DIY drawer. And so I just took them out, checked what kind of IC is that, Googled it, got the data sheet, and then just plugged it onto the breadboard module in my AE Modular, and then tried to make it work. And after I've done that with 3 ICs and a bunch of other stuff, I thought, hey, just put them all in one module, and then they're permanent there. So I think for these kinds of small projects, it's really great to have a breadboard module available.
So are these those CMOS chips that you see in Lunetta style synths? Or
Yes,
what?
exactly.
Yes? Okay.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's all square wave based. Yeah.
That could be part of it too. I mean, maybe people aren't really showing what they're doing until they have something like this. They could be making it on the breadboard and then actually soldering it up and, hey, here's my module. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that could be the case, definitely. Yeah.
So on the forum, there are a few people that show these kinds of ideas and play with them, and some of them which I just make an arbitrary selection and say I really like this, is really cool, and then I contact them and say, do you want to make this into a module? How can I help? So there are a few of those. And I think Robert is always open to collaborating with people that want to get into module making and sell them. So I know that Kurt has been working with Robert on sourcing some of the components, and I know that John Tuffin from Wonky Stuff has been in contact with Robert. And so I think you Felix, you still have a collaboration with Robert as well on one of the modules, which I see floating around, but it's been taking a few years.
Yeah, it's really slowly floating somewhere out there. But yeah. I hope we will make it happen. I think it's not quite there yet, but it's fun.
I am bugging Robert about this once
go ahead.
in a while. So no, that's really cool. So in terms of getting into DIY, I just wanted to quickly for the viewers out there show them that we've actually done quite a bit. So let me just quickly share my screen here. So maybe that. So we have a few things. So on the wiki, there's a page called AE Modular DIY, and we have some easy projects for the breadboard module. That's already been done. That's Matthias from Germany made these 2 projects, which are a square wave oscillator and then some FM modulation of that first project. And this is the kind of explanation I would like to see for beginners on the wiki, where you can really see it's very, very, very clearly defined what's going on, where to put things, and so on. So I'm always kind of in people's ears. Can you help me write a page like this? Because I don't really know how to do DIY, but I would really love to follow this along. And the other thing was actually started by Felix, which is on the forum. I don't know, can you guys see the forum page now?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So Felix, a while back, you started this this page here, the beginner's guide to AE Modular Synth, where you have a shopping list and a few very simple projects.
Yeah, that also, yeah, I sometimes have this urge to explain stuff, but I think there's an echo here. Ah, yeah, okay, now I think it's better, yeah. Yeah, I have this urge to explain stuff sometimes, and then I just, spend a few nights just writing things, and luckily or nicely enough, you, Carsten, made a subforum for those thoughts that I've written down. So yeah, if you click on the beginner's guide to AE Modular Synth DIY real quick, it's yeah, after the disclaimer, of course, that you all do this at your own risk. Also, just try to tell people what's on the front panel, what's behind the front panel on an AE Modular Synth, like what are all the different components, also with links to their Wikipedia pages so that you can do more reading. And so that's hopefully a good start to see what you're dealing with when you're working with the AE Modular Synth format in general, and also if you want to dig around in there and maybe modify stuff or build stuff yourself. And there have been quite a number of nice, well, there was quite a number of nice feedback posts about that, and I also received some other messages about that, which was nice. But I think there's, it was never really meant to be an interactive thing, really. I think the subforum was more like also, I think that was, might have even been before the wiki pages that we've created that. Yeah, it's basically just a source of knowledge, and if people have comments, of course, they're welcome to post underneath it. But it's really just a bunch of longer threads to get people going, and then I think the rest happens in the actual DIY forum after that, yeah. But yeah, I mean, definitely look in there if you're new to DIY or if you want to know more about the AE Modular stuff. And maybe we should link to the shopping list, because there are often questions on the forum where to buy the encoders or the potentiometers, or where to get the Arduinos and all that stuff. And that's actually in the shopping list thread there, with sometimes even several links to online stores where you can buy, your even everything from the basics, from a soldering iron to the right resistors and the right capacitors and so on.
So Zach, sorry, I had to mute you. There was a bit of an echo coming from you, so I've unmuted you again, if just in case you wanted to say something. So sorry, I had to use my moderator powers there.
Hey, it makes for a better show. Thank you. No, I didn't really have too much to say. I've used this a lot. I've referenced it a lot, even though I've done nothing to really speak of. So, yeah, eventually I want to have something to show for my visit count on that thing, whatever I've added to it.
Awesome. Look, I think it would be impossible to list all the awesome DIY projects. When I do the Tangible Waves blog posts, I do list quite a few of the DIY projects every time that I see coming up on the forum, just kind of as an overview. So if you keep your eye out on the Tangible Waves blog, then you can see the latest list of interesting projects, or at least the ones that I find interesting, and that's obviously completely biased. So although I do try to be as open as possible, it's impossible to list everything because, as we said at the beginning, it's just completely exploding. There's like DIY stuff now happening on the Discord, on Facebook, in the forum. It's really hard to keep up. It's amazing. Wow. And once
Well, I
once
know. I sometimes I can't visit the Discord like every day, and I'll hop on there and there'll be like tons of messages, and I'll be like, I can't. Okay, I'm just gonna have to let this go. I'm gonna have to let that go. It's out there, but I don't know what you were talking about. So it really is. I mean, and that's like the DIY channel alone in there. It's just like, okay, I missed a lot. I'm just gonna have to accept that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing. But you know what? I always tell people when I see a cool project, I'm like, put that on the forum. It will not last on the Discord. So I'm always pushing people over to the forum. So if you're watching, you feel like you're missing out. All this stuff makes its way to the forum.
Yeah, Discord is great if you just have like a quick question, or if you just want to chat, because you just, patching something, you have something on your mind. That is also maybe more temporary, as you say, Zach. But yeah, the documentation then usually happens on the forum, where it's more accessible for sure. Yeah.
I feel all these communication channels are a bit like a sieve. So I guess the most immediate thoughts are happening on Discord nowadays, and then some of those make their way into the forum, and then from the forum some of them make it to the Tangible Waves blog, and then some of them make it onto the wiki. So it's kind of like a trickle down effect of thoughts.
Yeah, that's true. But I like that we have all those channels.
Well,
like I think everybody.
Big community. It's become a big community, and
exactly.
That's like, I mean, that's just the way. That's the way it has to work. You can't see everything that goes on anymore. In the early days, you could, and now it's like there's so much going on. I mean, like people reference a Facebook group, and I don't have Facebook, so I'm like, I don't even know what's going on there, and I'm sure it's a whole different world than what's going on in the Discord, which is where I'm usually at.
It's not too different. I'm one of the two moderators on the Facebook group, and I do channel everyone back to the forum as much as I can.
A lot of teasers go to the Facebook though, I think, because people will cross post the teasers done in from Facebook, and I'll see that and I'll be like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Well, it was actually funny when Felix and I started the forum, almost 2.5 years ago now, or even longer. It's crazy how long that is. We were planning this forum for a while, and then on the night I wanted to take the forum live, the Facebook forum the Facebook group opened up on the same day. I go like, oh no, I wanted to have the forum so we don't have a Facebook group. And then someone else in America just opened up their Facebook group, and I just messaged him straight away, saying, dude, we've been working on the forum for like weeks.
But it worked out quite well, I suppose. Like I think the Facebook group was pretty dead for a while, and now it's coming back to life, which is nice.
Yeah, I think it's time now. And he was kind enough to put a big message on the group and put everyone over to the forum. But I think now that, as you said, the community has grown so much, you can't escape Facebook anymore. Okay.
All right.
So it's getting pretty late here, or late for you anyway, Felix.
I've got my drink here. I'm fine for another hour at least.
What about you, Zach? Do you have a few more minutes to talk about the next topic?
Yeah, I've got a few minutes. I don't hear my baby crying yet, so when I hear him, then I'll have to, I might disappear.
Okay, that's
All
fine.
right.
Look, maybe we just do a little bit of an introduction of this topic and revisit it in later podcasts. And definitely it's something that's dear to my heart. So you'll probably see more about that in the forum coming up. So this next topic is about patterns of modular synthesis. And I'm a software developer, so a pretty old one. So in my world, we talk about patterns of reusable software components. And that's coming back actually from a book by Christopher Alexander, who was an architect. And he talked about patterns in architecture, where certain things are being reused in certain ways, although they look different, they have the same structure, like how you would design a waiting lounge. There are some very clear patterns that you would use to make a room being a waiting lounge as opposed to be an office where work is being done. Although they're both rectangular rooms, they are done in different ways to achieve those different functions. And I thought we have this topic come up, especially with beginners of modular synthesizers. How do you record your patches? You know, you make a cool patch, it sounds awesome, but once you take out all the cables, it's gone. How do you recreate it? And we had a very long thread on the forum about different types of recording, where the patch leads go. And I find all of this just incredibly tedious. I do not want to record where patch leads go and knob positions and things like that. And I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I find this just too tedious. So once I take out the cables, it's gone. I will.
Yeah, I think early on, when I first got my modular and you know, coming from software before, you know, what little software I use, not having a save button was really like this thing. You know, I was like, I can't save this, and it was kind of like I didn't like it at first, and I was, you know, I was on that thread trying to figure out how can we save this, how can we save these things, and somebody had written a Python script to save patches, and that was actually really, it's a nice script and everything, and it worked well, and I was like, I wanted to host it so that we could put it on the, you know, internet and allow people to easily save patches that way. And then I used my modular synth more. I used it more, and I started to really like the fleeting aspect of it, and I guess that's when I started recording my patches. And I basically, if I'm not taking a video of my patch, I'm probably not recording the sound either. That's sort of my way of saving. But then I found I didn't need to save. I started to understand how different things interact in different ways, and I could kind of just visualize in my head, like, oh, if I want this sound, I could probably get it this way. And then you get close, and then you go, oh, maybe if I add this or remove that, and yeah, that was my feeling on saving patches and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of happens more in your mind. Like, as you say, at some point it just clicks, and then you find the joy in trying to recreate something and then just add to it in a way. Like, I also find that just recreating something is something that isn't really, I don't know, exciting me that much with the modular synth. For me, it's always just, you know, having a more or less broad direction I want to go in with a patch, and then just seeing what happens on the way, basically. And if I miss the target, that's perfectly fine usually, because I found something else that was really fun. So a patch that I have in my head is more like a loose inspiration than like a concrete goal.
Yeah, definitely. That's like, I have that same exact experience. I mean, I always like to say they lend themselves to happy happy mistakes. It's like that's the whole thing with modular. I mean, that's what makes it so much fun, in my opinion. It's like that sort of you never quite know what's going to happen. You have this idea, but you don't fully know, and then you stumble onto something, and all of a sudden the song you had envisioned taking this whole different path.
Mm.
It's just a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah.
It feels really alive in that
So
way.
Karsten, what are some of your reusable modular synth patch techniques then? I suppose that's where you're going with this, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, with beginners, it's always the question, how do I get sound out of it? So I made a video about the basic patch and where to go from there. And that's really how I start as well. I mean, I start every single track with patching an oscillator straight into the audio output. That's how I start. And then I go from there. I listen to that sound of that oscillator, and then I patch it through a filter, one of the 3 or 4 different filters, and listen to that. And then I patch it into an envelope, and then you go from there. You then expand. You patch the envelope into an LFO to get some rhythmic stuff, and you play around with the envelope lengths, the attack length and the decay length, and see how the sound behaves with different attacks and different decays. And then you start adding pitch from a sequencer, and you start experimenting with that. And then suddenly you're in melodic land, which I have no idea about. And that's where things become really frustrating for me once I hit that pitch thing, where I suddenly have to think of scales and pitches and thirds and fifths and things like that. And then I go like, oh no, I can't do a melody. It sounds awful. So that's when things get really frustrating. But before that, it's all beautiful. It's just
Yeah. But it's interesting that because I work the same way, and I feel that before I started with modular synth, I was really not into experimental music at all, and it just came with playing with the modular synth that I also like to listen to other people's experimental music. And I think that probably really comes from this workflow that you start with this bare oscillator drone, which is just going on, and you've got that in your ear for like minutes until you reach somewhere else where it's actually broken into rhythmic sections. And I have a feeling that this is really a big part in changing your own musical taste, probably even in a way, because you're just subjecting yourself to this unusual musical content that you're creating along the way until you're actually reaching at some point that it's starting to sound more like a traditional synthesizer or piano or whatever. So I think that can actually very much form your tastes quite drastically over the time that you spend with modular synthesizer.
I fully agree with that. When I bought mine, sort of my idea, what I wanted to do, and this is where my name came from, Slowscape. I'm a visual artist first. I've always done visual art, but I've always had this love for music and things like that. So anyway, I bought the AE Modular with the idea that I wanted to start a YouTube channel that I sort of had really slow visuals that were like kind of relaxing maybe, and then I wanted to put some like handmade ambient, analog ambient behind it, and that's what I wanted to do. I haven't done one of those videos.
your cactus video is awesome, by the way.
Oh well,
Yeah.
that's the most relaxing one I've probably done. Yeah, but it was like it totally formed what I wanted to. It changed what I was going to do. And most of my songs have beats in them now. I guess I have some patterns that I usually, I tend to do, and I'll start. Obviously, I like this MM33 a lot. It's a matrix mixer by Wonky Stuff, and I got it right in the center because it's just so useful. And yeah, I don't think I ever really even disconnect these two wires that go out from the MM33 into the output here. I let those just stay there because I'm gonna need them. And there's other things that sort of I'll leave plugged in. Um, you know, some of these envelopes that go to the VCA. I mean, before getting into this, I didn't even know how that worked, and now I know the VCA sort of that's what allows the sound to start and stop, and then the envelope shapes that. You know, I never knew that, so so now I kind of like those are just almost hardwired together a lot of the time. But
Yeah, and I see you got the RBSS, the Turing Machine bit shift sequencer as well. I
yeah,
think
I
as soon
just
as
got
the
that.
quantizer came out, I have to suppose that all of us have this pattern now where you send the RBSS to the quantizer, and that's kind of the thing that
Yeah,
just
that was
naturally comes.
yeah, that was a big thing. When the RBSS came out, I was like, oh man, like I don't think I could handle it without it being quantized. I need that quantizer. So yeah, I had to make that jump and get the quantizer and the RBSS. Um,
So exactly with that, I found that I actually take the RBSS into the 2CV tool and then into the quantizer to limit the range of notes. So
oh,
that's
interesting.
so
I
that's a
never
pattern that
thought
I
about
do a lot actually. I use the CV tool is actually my most used tool nowadays, and I think I have to get another one because I'm
that. Huh.
running out of it only has two channels. And that really allows you, even more than an attenuator, to really limit the CV modulation of anything, really, to a really usable range. And I
Mhm.
discussed this with Felix in the morning, that I use it for the pulse width modulation on the 20CD. I think a recent forum post said, "Oh, it's broken. When you use the pulse width modulation on the 2OCD, the very left cuts it out, the very right cuts it out. There's only a tiny usable spectrum in the middle of the knob. And if you put that to an LFO into it, then you can't really pulse width modulate the oscillator because it cuts out on each end. And you really need the CV tool to put it into a range where you can really use an LFO to pulse width modulate it effectively. So that's
And on that topic, actually, not the forum topic, but the topic of the ranges of the pulse width modulation, Robert once said that he prefers to have the ranges as big as possible because you can always, using attenuators or the 2VC tool, narrow them down and shift them around a little bit. But if you don't have the ranges large enough, then you can't get rhythmic effects, for example. You'd always need the VCA, but now that the ranges of the pulse width modulation are so high that it actually cuts off the waveform in both ends, you wouldn't necessarily even need a VCA. You could just modulate it to silence and then back into audio range.
I
So I
actually
think that's
use that. I use that technique a lot. Actually, I mean, it's kind of like a secret VCA sometimes to use that pulse width, and just turn it off. Yeah, it's actually really useful. And I remember hearing or seeing posts on the forums like, uh, you know, why does it go so far? And that totally makes sense. I hadn't heard that explanation, but I mean, I found it useful. Um, I feel like uh, with modular and it being so, it's not software. You know, it's not going to be the same every single time for every single person. And I think that's just part of modular. I mean, that's how you get your unique sound sometimes.
that's really awesome. I actually never thought about it like that to use it for rhythmic effects. So I have to try that out now. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's a little secret hack for sure.
Yeah, yeah. It's where really everything that you could see as a bug is really a feature in
Yeah,
this.
exactly. I mean, it's you're being creative, and that
Hmm.
that goes back to why I loved the Starter Rack 2 so
Hmm.
much because it made me creative. I'm like, I only have two VCAs, but I need some sound to turn on and off or something. How can I do that?
Yeah, yeah.
And there's ways, you know, and there's a few. I mean, even I use the, where is it? Wave folder. I use the wave folder. It also has like a dead spot on each side. And I use that all the time. I mean, I think I've even used that as like a kick before.
Mm. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, totally. Also, I like the drive of the wave folder without the folding. Even like you can just boost your signals if something is too quiet. That's also very useful without totally distorting the sound. And also in regards to the 2CV tool that you mentioned, Carsten, when you push, when you feed one output into the input of the second tool and you just push the offsets, you can also clip the waveform. So you can use this 2CV tool as a wave folder or a waveform clipper as well, even though it's really not meant to do that, but it can. And that's also like, I think there's lots of these small things to discover on many modules. And having
So
ranges as wide as possible is great for that.
someone had just told me you could turn the kick module into an FM synthesis module somehow. I don't.
Which module is that?
The kick.
The kick module. Oh, wow.
Okay.
So, I mean, just get creative. That's all we're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how well it would track and everything, but I mean, you could probably get some. I haven't played with that yet.
Mhm.
Well, one cool thing we did on the forum early on was those patch challenges, and one of those, I think the very first challenge actually was about what do you do when you don't have an oscillator? So that, how do you turn other modules into oscillators? And I cheated because it was my very first ever patch with a modular system. So I just used the resonance on the filter to use as an oscillator. So that's an easy one. But I think Felix, you actually just what did you just patched something into the delay to create a feedback effect or something like that.
Maybe. I actually don't remember what I've used, but it was a very fun challenge. But even though you say it's cheating with your just turning the resonance up on the filter, I think that's also overlooked, at least when you're starting that journey of your modular synthesis, is that when the resonance is too high, you always think, oh no, now everything's screeching and turn it down. But if you just lower the volume at the end and then just turn it to self-resonance, it actually is like a very nice sine wave, which is usually pretty dull, but since it's so loud, you don't hear it like that. So if you turn down the volume at the end, just turn all the filters up into self-resonance, you can actually do some really nice FM as well, and with really nice sine waves that are resulting from the feedback loop. And you can, if you have a filter also that doesn't reach into nice self-oscillation, you can just patch a feedback loop from the output to the input of the filter directly or through an attenuator, because resonance is usually just an internal feedback loop. So you can also patch that feedback loop outside of the module by just patching output back to the input. And like this, you can make almost any filter self-resonate, and sometimes even harsher than it normally does. And that's also a nice trick sometimes.
Yeah, playing with feedback is a lot of fun. That's like one of the really cool things when it comes to modular is just that ability. But yeah, I just thought of a pattern that getting back to the patterns, like I just thought of one that I use a lot. And I did a video about it, and it's the side chaining or ducking video. That's a pattern that I use like all the time. It's a sound that I like, and you can actually do a lot with it. I've discovered, I know a lot of people work with side chaining and stuff like that, but it was all new to me, and I just did it on the modular, so it's kind of fun.
Yeah, and I feel sidechaining is more of like a software or hardware compressor thing, which is not necessarily associated with modular synthesizers. So I think having that or having the possibility to patch that in a rack is really useful. And so how do you achieve this?
Let's see. Well, I think I just rearranged everything, so it's kind of. But I had the whole documentation on my video. Basically, well, with this QVCA, you could actually do it right out of the box. the QVCA by Wonky Stuff will actually invert the signal that you send in, and then you could take that inverted signal and plug it into a different VCA input, and you could actually, so basically you'll have one that's high and one that's low, and then they kind of flip flop like that, and you could use that to remove one sound while another one, say you have a kick drum, and that's typically how I'll use it. I'll have the kick hit and then have something kind of duck under it, just to like take some of that sound out and give that some room to like kind of hit. I used it probably too much on the album we did, but
So do you put an attenuator between that, or do you always lower it completely?
Yeah, so I usually use, I'm trying to find the module. It's the oh, here, 2ATT CV. I use that one typically because it has an inverted output here, and then I'm able to attenuate it that way with just right directly in that module. Yeah, so that's typically how I do it.
Yeah, so that's actually pretty easy patch, right? But you have to get the idea first.
My video went a little long, and I wasn't very concise with my words, but it's all there, and it's easy in the end, definitely.
I will link to that video in the description of this podcast, so people can check it out.
Yeah, it's a useful technique. I mean, I use it all the time. Once I discovered it, I was like, yeah, that's going in everything I do.
So if we would change the name from modular patterns to modular techniques, would that be more accessible or more understandable for people?
Probably, I suppose, yeah.
I'm losing connection, guys. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me.
I think you're back now. So I was asking Zach, if I would change the topic from patterns to techniques, would that make more sense to talk about that? Would people understand that better? What do you think?
Yeah, but I think we can do that. I think that's indeed, because I was struggling with the pattern idea a little bit because I'm not that into software, where it makes total sense, I think. But yeah, we can call the techniques later on as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's something I would like to start that as a thread on the forum, and then put this into wiki and maybe make videos about that, or ask people to make videos about their favorite techniques. Just like Zach made the ducking video, and I made the basic patch video. Maybe we have more videos of things, how to create feedback loops and things like that, and then just call that a series about modular techniques that people are using all the time to achieve certain effects.
So yeah, if you are watching this right now, definitely post it in the comments underneath Carsten's video also what your favorite modular techniques are, so that we can collect them, and also definitely post them on the forum as well when we make this thread. Because that's also, because modular synthesis is such a unique and personal experience for everyone. It's very nice to share these things, because in the end many of us are using the same modules, but we're using them in different ways. And it's nice to experience the mindsets of other people there, I think. Yeah, like one thing I wanted to mention real quick, because especially now with the mix console module, we have a good way to achieve stereo, or a simple way to achieve a stereo signal or stereo output, is a technique where you use basically the same voice structure, but twice. And then you just pan it hard on each ear. And I think that's a technique that has been around like in all kinds of music styles for years. But with a modular synth, it's quite simple but very rewarding, I think, because just for example, you have just a drone, just one VCO, and then you add a little melody to it from a sequencer. But then you add the same VCO tuned the same way a second time, controlled by the same sequence, and you pan each VCO to each ear. Even though they're tuned as precise as possible, since they're still analog, they won't sound exactly the same. So you will get like an interesting stereo image that is more or less moving depending on how well you tune both oscillators. So if you have like one synthesizer voice or one patch even, maybe try to think of a way how to copy that if you have enough modules or just parts of that patch, and then just pan them hard left and right and see where it gets you. Because I think stereo in a modular synth opens up a whole new world. Because usually it's mono, because we're always struggling to have like enough modules for what we do anyway, and then having to have them twice for each ear is sometimes more difficult. But now with the mix console where you can pan stuff easily, it has gotten a lot easier to incorporate stereo synthesis into our AE modulars, and I think we should definitely look more into that. And then maybe even at some point quadraphonic stuff where you have 4 speakers and you can, rotate the sounds around you. But yeah, I actually asked Robert once, I don't think he replied to that email, which is totally fine because it was a weird idea, if we could have like one of those virtual surround chips on a module, which create like virtual surround for the headsets. And that was big, I think, in the late 90s, early 2000 computer games. And there were technologies back then that actually worked, where you could, move into 3D space, and just with 2 ears, you could, have like a 3-dimensional feeling for the sound. And those chips are probably very cheap, I suppose, nowadays. And so you could have like a module where you pipe several inputs into, and then you can modulate where the sound is if you're listening to it on the stereo headphone. Yeah. I think that would be nice and also pretty unique, because I don't think other modular synths have that.
So if you're out there and listening to this and you're a DIY
something
guru, just build it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something I wanted stereo on this little thing, and I started patching in just really weird ways. And I ended up getting a stereo sound that was like doing different things on each ear. So I mean, you could really do it with nothing. If you have very little modules, even without the mixed console, which does make it easier, obviously, just get creative. That's like what I'm all about, is like get creative. There's so many cool things you could do, and you could get stereo sound that's like probably out of this world. Just like sounds that you've never heard before, and you're just like, what is going on? It's really cool. Just get creative.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I also like to do is to use the logic module, which has, 2 inputs for usually square waves. And then you have several logic outputs like OR, XOR, and or NAND outputs. And because you have several outputs, you can also just route the OR output to the left ear and the XOR output to the right ear. And so everything you're hearing is still based on the 2 square waves, but it's always moving around at audio rate. So it's just like this weird, super quick panning effect, which is also just always just square waves. So always just hard left, right. And that's also fun to get very easy stereo, because the module has those 3 outputs. And you could even do one in the middle and one of the other ones, one each ear even.
I might have to try that one. That sounds fun.
Everything with square waves and logic modules is fun.
I think it's a very underrated module. Yeah.
I think that's a topic for a whole nother show, because I honestly didn't know what to do. With the logic modules and stuff like that. I mean, I have a few of them now, and I never really figured out how to use them well, or how to do something that I really liked with them. So I just kind of took them out of my rack, but maybe I should throw them in a small one and really learn them, because that's a top. We got to do that for one of the shows.
Well, I only ever use them in audio rate successfully. So, and that's just something that is mind-boggling. I made one video where I just had this idea. I want to recreate a Lunetta-style synth with my AE Modular, and I put all kinds of square waves into the logic modules. And made this video, and this is my most watched video on my channel. I think it has twice as many views as any other video I have, just because, I don't know, there's something about square waves and logic that attracts people, I don't know, or maybe the noisy style of it. So definitely something that's worthwhile exploring.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I find in my patches often that I have a lot of gate and triggers which are not being used, because you have clock dividers and sequencers, and all of them have gate outputs or trigger outputs, but there are not a lot of modules in my rack, or not enough modules to use them all. So whenever you have spare gates that are generated by some modules, you just always put them into a logic module and take the output to re-trigger your envelopes. That's one technique that you can always do, because the most envelopes, I'm not sure if the new 2env actually has 2 inputs, but the old envelopes, they have one gate and a second gate input as well. So you can actually mix 2 gates and they will re-trigger. So when you have a logic module that just takes any spare triggers and just generates a new sequence out of them, you can just use them to re-trigger envelopes, a second time between beats and all that stuff. So that's what I then like to do. Just whenever you have spare triggers, patch them into logic and patch the logic into whatever is open as a trigger receptacle, basically.
We need to do a whole show on this. It sounds like you know what you're doing.
All right. Look, guys, I'll probably wrap this up here because it's gone over an hour. I did think that we would do some live patching on my modular that I've rigged up right next to me, but I don't think we have time for this. And I think we've talked about a lot of ideas. I will probably write some of those into the description and maybe also on the forum so that people can interact with it. Just want to thank you guys very, very much for joining in this podcast, and thanks Felix for having the idea in the first place, and Zach for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here. So this is again another transcontinental Zoomcast with me in Australia, Felix in Germany, and Zach in the US, which it's just mind-boggling that this works nowadays. It's really, really cool. Yeah. And yeah, thanks very much for it. It was really, really a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. So thanks for talking about your favorite techniques.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together. I had a lot of fun, and I'm glad I was able to join you on this one.
Yeah, that was really cool. So yeah, let's do it again soon.
Yeah.
And see what the community says, and who is going to do the next introduction video, or no, the intro jingle and animation. So because we can change that for every episode. So if you want to do something, then definitely send it over to any of us on the forum.
And viewers, if you have any ideas of what we should talk about, or if you would want to be on a Zoomcast with us, just leave a comment in the comment section below. And we definitely get back to you.
Okay.
Thanks very much,
awesome.
everyone.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
See you guys.
And see you soon.
See ya.
Bye-bye.